Julia O'Shea is a respiratory supervisor at the University of Colorado Hospital. Her domain is critical care, and she's also a yoga instructor for pulmonary rehab. Her passion for yoga started in respiratory care school, where she noted an increasing amount of literature on the benefits of yoga for those with breathing issues. And this is in a quote, "Yoga supports the power and strength that is already within us." Like that quote. Julia loves teaching people about respiratory-related health and practicing yoga, and it is a great combination. Goes back over 5,000 years, I believe, at least that long. And it makes inherent sense, doesn't it? If you learn how to control your breathing, you may learn how to control your anxiety. And if you learn how to control your anxiety, you might learn how to smooth out that breathing pattern. Maybe you get a little more oxygen and get rid of a little carbon dioxide. By the way, that's all in the literature. So, I don't need to do any more than that. Is that enough to get you in here? All right.
Okay. 3 weeks without food. 3 days without water. 3 minutes without air. Every person sitting here today understands what it feels like when you can't breathe, and how nothing else matters until you can catch your breath. I'm standing in front of you today to help teach you how to control your breathing and how to find strength in your breath. Since we're here today to learn about yoga and breathing, I'd like to start out by taking 3 breaths together. So, sitting up as straight as possible. And then we'll start out by exhaling the air, blowing it out. And then taking a nice slow deep breath in. And then exhale out your mouth, releasing any tension. And then we'll do 2 more. So inhale, filling up your lungs. And then exhale, let it go. And then one more time. Inhale, really filling up. And then exhale. All right, thank you. I feel much more relaxed now. I was pretty nervous. Okay, so first off, a little bit about me and why am I standing up here as a respiratory therapist talking to you about yoga. So like many respiratory therapists, I was inspired to become an RT because my younger brother had asthma. And I still remember when we were younger being in the hospital with him. He was probably about 6 years old, and watching him struggle to breathe. And it was very stressful for me and my parents. And I still remember the respiratory therapist who would come in with the funny scrubs and the tie-dye socks. And she would come to give him his treatments. And she brought with her this sense of ease and tranquility because she distracted him from his breathlessness. Little did I know then that I would become the respiratory therapist, who that would be my job, to bring tranquility and ease to stressful situations to help people breathe. Respiratory therapy brought me to my yoga practice. I never did yoga before I was a respiratory therapist. It was my first semester in RT school here at Pima, and I was assigned to write a paper on a respiratory disease process. So I naturally chose asthma. As I did my research, what I came across was the term complementary alternative medicine. So what this is, it's just like it sounds. It's just different types of therapy to help patients just deal with what they're going through, not to replace their medicine and their traditional type of therapy. But what fascinated me was there was research and evidence out there that showed that people who practice different types of yoga breathing could help to control their anxiety and breathlessness. There was one example with a woman who had pretty severe asthma, and when she would feel her exacerbation coming on, she would lay on the floor and place her hand on her belly and just focus on her yoga breathing. And what it would do is it would help to open up the airways so that her exacerbation wasn't as severe as it could have been. So from that moment, I knew that I had to learn more about yoga so I could teach my patients. This was about 13 years ago, and I was living in Boulder, Colorado at the time, and I didn't know where to start. I didn't know how to learn this thing called yoga. So I remember walking into my first class, and immediately I was just stunned. I thought to myself, is this an audition for the Cirque du Soleil? There were people in tight clothes, walking on their hands and putting their legs behind their heads, and I thought, this is not for me, I can't do that sort of thing. But I knew this was something I had to learn so that I could teach my patients. So I went ahead and I did the best that I could, and I struggled. I didn't get it. Years would pass and my relationship with yoga would wax and wane, mostly because I was very stiff, not very flexible, and then just emotionally I didn't understand why this was so special and why it was going to help my patients. Then finally I learned about the breath. Sounds silly that a respiratory therapist would learn about the breath in a yoga class. But what I learned, and what the ancient yogis knew, is that the breath is the ruler of the mind. Although it takes a little time before the mind will start to believe that. I became fascinated with yoga's connection to respiratory science. I researched how the breath could manifest changes in the body and in the mind, and how these ancient yogis would use the breath to reach enlightenment. Since I have not yet reached enlightenment, you'll have to stay tuned for my next talk, Reaching Enlightenment Through Pursed Lip Breathing. So I finally decided to go through yoga teacher training. The intention was to be able to teach our patients at the University of Colorado. As I studied, my two worlds collided, and so much began to make sense. With the support of Alex Swirl, our pulmonary rehab coordinator, she helped to set up yoga classes 2 days a week for our pulmonary rehab patients, which a lot of them are here right now, and they still do yoga. We started very simple, chair yoga with the emphasis on the breath. We started to see changes immediately. It was at the end of teaching my second class that one of the participants came up to me and he said, "Julia, can you help me increase my lung capacity?" So being a respiratory therapist, I knew this wasn't possible, but I wanted to be polite. And I said, well, no, I can't help you increase your lung capacity, but yoga will help you a lot. It'll help with relaxation, and I went on. And he insisted. He said, no, I am a shallow breather. I only breathe from here to here. And after doing 2 yoga classes, I'm able to breathe into parts of my lungs that I was never able to breathe into before. 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water, 3 minutes without air. So what is yoga? There are many definitions on the word yoga. It means to yoke or to unite. Traditionally, the definition is about the union of the mind, the body, and the spirit. Well, when I've heard that multiple times, I was still like, well, what does that mean? How am I going to combine all these things in my body? But one of my teachers, I think, stated it in a way that really resonated with me. And he said, yoga is about extending your life. So meaning it gives you more time to connect with what's going on inside of you so you can figure your stuff out. The basic foundation of a yoga practice is the physical, or what they call the asana in Sanskrit. There is the breath, otherwise known as the pranayama. And then there's meditation or mindfulness, could be another way of stating it. Yoga's message is universal. It's about the means by which we can make the changes we desire in our lives. It has its roots dating back some 4,000 years ago, give or take 1,000 years. During these times, the ancient yogis, they spent a lot of time in the caves of the Himalayas. During this spare time hanging out in caves, they had no choice but to discover what was going on within themselves. They studied the science of the breath, called pranayama. I like to think they were the first respiratory therapists. I think of yoga as this fabulous buffet. So there's so many different styles and philosophies to choose from. And just like any feast, you get to pick and choose what you like and you don't like. Many people have tried yoga before, and they think of the kind that I spoke about in the beginning, where you're putting your leg behind your head and things like that. And they said, no, that's just not for me, I can't do that. But really, everybody can practice yoga, but not everybody can practice all types of yoga. So my study of respiratory brought me to my yoga practice because of its foundations in the breath. So breathing is the only system in the body that can either be voluntary or involuntary. So that is to say, we can sit there and consciously think about how we breathe, or we just let it slip into the unconscious, which is a good thing. You don't want to have to worry about that. Yogis believe in choice. So they decide that we get to choose how we breathe. And by doing this, we access the doorway to our nervous system. One side of our nervous system prepares us for emergencies, sometimes called the fight or flight. And then the other side of the nervous system teaches us relaxation and how to be calm, sometimes called the rest and digest. Most of our time in our daily lives, we live in the fight or flight side of our nervous system. We're constantly having to adapt and evolve to what's coming our way. It's when we take time to slow down that we experience more of the rest and digest. So our body's goal is to find balance between these two sides of the nervous system. In today's society, many people live in a state of overactive fight or flight. We can see this in ourselves. We wake up, we're constantly going, we have our list of things to do. Some of us turn on the news right away. The news preys on our fight or flight side of our nervous system. Even being in front of a screen activates that fight or flight nervous system. So 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water, and 3 minutes without air. The breath would not be possible if it weren't for our beloved respiratory muscles. So we have our abdominal muscles that help us breathe. We have the intercostals, which are the muscles in between our ribs. We have the scalenes and the sternomastoids, which are the muscles of the neck. And then my favorite muscle, the diaphragm. So I think the diaphragm has to be the most interesting and complex muscles in the body. It has the only tendon that's not connected to the skeletal system. It takes the shape of the heart and the rib cage and the lungs, as well as the abdominal organs. And its anatomical arrangement is how it functions. So running through the diaphragm is the 10th cranial nerve, otherwise sometimes called the vagus nerve. It's the largest nerve in the body, and it runs from the brain into the abdomen, and it's the major channel of the rest and digest side of the nervous system. The vagus nerve enters the heart, and it can tell the heart to slow down when it starts to go too fast. Through diaphragmatic breathing, we have the ability to engage the vagus nerve to help that rest and digest part of our nervous system activate. One of the breathing techniques we teach in pulmonary rehab is that diaphragmatic or belly breathing, for those of you who have been through pulmonary rehab. It's really a magical thing. If you're stressed out body or a burning building, the vagus nerve would be the hose that carries the water to quell the flames, to put out the fire and return the body into a non-emergency state. Let's practice a breathing technique that most of us have probably learned called pursed lip breathing. You guys with me? Yeah, okay. All right, so closing your eyes, if it's comfortable. If it's not, it's okay. You can just kind of gaze down. But I want you to place one hand on your belly, your abdomen area. And just right now, don't change the breath, but I just want you to notice. Scan your body, scan your breath, without any judgments. Just as we use the phrase, smell the flowers and blow out the birthday candles, we're going to do the same, except we're going to make a wish. Together, we're going to wish that all people might find strength within their breath. All right, so taking your nice inhale through your nose, and then exhale, pursed lip, blow it out. Let's do that 2 more times. So inhale, filling up your lungs. And then exhale, nice, slow, long exhale through pursed lips. One more time, inhale. And exhale, blowing it out. And then you can release your hand and just take a moment and notice how you feel. Do you feel more relaxed? Did you notice the strength of your abdominal muscles when you did that? I think this might be one of the most powerful breathing techniques that we teach our patients. Some of you may have been told to try and make your exhale longer than your inhale. So pursed lip breathing goes right to that. And some of you who've been through pulmonary rehab will have heard this before. But by adding that pressure when you purse your lips, it helps to open up your airways, which is good for everybody. Most of us don't exhale enough, but especially if you have a component of lung disease, whatever it may be, what can happen is that air gets trapped inside of your lungs, and you get that feeling of breathlessness because you're working from here to here, and the rest has air. So by using that pursed lip breathing, you help to open up the airways and get more of the air out. So one of the things I encourage my patients is to do this daily. Do this twice a day when you're feeling good, not just when you're in an exacerbation, because I know that's when most of us are taught pursed lip breathing. Pursed lip breathing helps to slow down the heart rate by connecting that vagus nerve or 10th cranial nerve, and it activates that rest and digest part of our nervous system. So we're going to practice another breathing exercise. I'm kind of helping get more oxygen into your bodies at the same time, because I know everybody just ate lunch and is probably ready to go to sleep. It's okay, I'm not taking it personally. So this is called the 3-part yogic breath. And I believe there should be a handout available for you guys.
It should be in their bag.
Okay, so it should be in your bag for you to reference later if you'd like. So with this breath, again, with all of our breathing techniques, we want you to sit up as straight as possible, right? The posture to make room for the lungs. And just start to bring your awareness into your breathing. So we'll start by placing our hands on our belly. So the bottom of the rib cage, it could be a little bit on the side. And we're basically going to do diaphragmatic breathing for those of you who have done that in pulmonary rehab. So what we're focusing on here, as you inhale, the air moves down into the bottom of the lungs and you get this expansion out forward. And then as you exhale, it comes back in. And it might be really subtle, you may not even feel it at all, but it's just recognizing that there is that movement with the breath down in this region of the diaphragm. That's the inhale, the expansion, and then the exhale, moving back in. So taking 2 breaths here and just noticing how that feels. And you can use pursed-lip breathing. Always use pursed-lip breathing if it makes you feel good. Okay, so the second part of this breathing technique takes us to the rib cage. So hands can be on the side of the ribs or maybe on the front. And you can use both hands, I just can't right now. All right, so here, as you breathe, your ribs are going to expand side to side, kind of like a fireplace bellows. So here you have these muscles, the intercostals, that are helping as you inhale to open up your rib cage, and then as you exhale, it comes back in, almost like wings. So you inhale, you fill up, rib cage expands, and then you exhale, and it comes back in. Let's do one more of those. So inhale into your ribs, spreading them, and then exhale, coming back in. And then the third part of this breath is the upper chest. So this is an area where a lot of us breathe into day to day without even thinking about. So you'll place your hands right about just below your clavicles. Yep. And then here we notice the shape change of the breath. It's more of this up and down. So when you inhale, you'll feel this rise of the chest, and then when you exhale, it comes back down. So let's take 2 breaths here. So inhale into the top, and then exhale, you can purse lip, let it go. And one more time, inhale, and then exhale, blowing it out. And then you can release your hands. So we're going to tie these 3 areas together. So the idea is that we don't just breathe right here. We breathe in a 3-dimensional shape, starting from the bottom to the top. No judgment, this is hard. I have students who have been doing yoga for a long, long time, and it takes a while to tune into this, but I want you to try. So I like to place one hand on my belly, and then one hand near my heart. And again, if it's comfortable to close down your eyes, just so that you can tune inward to what's going on. So with your inhale breath, imagine filling up into your belly, your ribs, and then your upper chest. And then exhale, upper chest, ribs, and belly. Let's take 2 more. To your breath. Inhale, filling up, and exhale, letting go. And again, you can always use pursed lip breathing. One more time, nice, slow, deep breath. And exhale, blowing it out. And then releasing the breath, and again, just noticing how you feel. Noticing the strength of the muscles that work to help the breath. So what we are practicing is a very ancient science called pranayama. Speaking of science, I suppose we should talk about some evidence. Not to mention Dr. Bowl might be here, and as some of the RTs know, he's a stickler for evidence. And a study done in India at the Dr. Murari Lai Chest Hospital. They studied the role of pranayama in their pulmonary rehab COPD patients. So they taught them various techniques to work the breath. What they found out was that there was improvement in lung function. The patients had reduced symptoms. They became more actively involved in their own health care. They were more independent in performing their daily activities, thus less dependent on family, friends, health professionals, and expensive medical resources. As you can imagine, India has a few thousand years ahead of us on yoga breathing and studying the effects. But Western medicine is catching on. We're starting to bring yoga into our healthcare systems and starting to prove its benefits. In a recent study that has not been published yet at the University of Vermont Medical Center, one of our pulmonologists, Dr. David Kaminsky, decided that he wanted to put together a study about yoga breathing and COPD patients. So his goal of this study was to be able to teach people with COPD how to breathe better, but ultimately it was because in a lot of areas in Vermont, there's a lot of rural areas just like Colorado, and people didn't have access to pulmonary rehab. I mean, the studies show that pulmonary rehab helps with exercise tolerance, helps with depression, all sorts of stuff. But if you don't have access to pulmonary rehab, what do you do? So what he did was he trained people to go out into the community and teach these patients about the 3-part breath, what I just taught you. It was really amazing. So what they discovered was that through this pranayama practice, the results were an increase in the 6-minute walk distance. There were trends that showed a decrease in the resting and dynamic hyperinflation, so they used spirometry to prove that. There were improvements in the shortness of breath scores. There was improvement in the quality of life scores. The average practice at home was just 15 minutes. It was well tolerated and enjoyed, and there were no adverse effects to pranayama. There are a lot of other benefits from yoga. So physically, it can help with strength. In a study published in the journal Topics in Geriatric Rehabilitation, they reported an increase in the bone mineral density of women who did yoga regularly. Yoga can help to build bone health in your hips, your spine, and your wrists, the bones most vulnerable to fracture. Yoga helps with balance, helps to sharpen your concentration and body awareness. This is especially beneficial for women over the age of 50 who have had a hip fracture. They have a 25% mortality rate within the first year. Yoga helps with flexibility, both mentally and physically. Allows for more freedom of your day-to-day movements and activities, and it helps with posture. This can easily be demonstrated. So if everyone would pull out their cell phone, I'll just pretend I have one. And then you breathe. And then you put your cell phone away. Right? You guys have seen the cell phone posture? So 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water, 3 minutes without air. Not being able to breathe is one of the most traumatic events someone can face. You're literally facing death. When this happens repeatedly, it changes how our brains are wired, making us more susceptible to anxiousness and panic attacks. This is what I call trauma breathing. So I have a good friend of mine who is a trauma psychologist, and she does a lot of work with PTSD. Not in the sense of from war, but more in the sense of people who have undergone an extreme trauma. So from her, she's taught me a lot about the brain. But bear with me, I'm not a neuroscientist or a psychologist, but I'll do my best to explain to you. So in recent studies with people who've gone through traumatic stress, they've studied the brain and they learned that it can change. This is called neuroplasticity. It's kind of a buzzword that you may hear more of in news and whatnot today. So neuroplasticity teaches us that the brain can change based on experience. This is how yoga can help. Okay, so here's the part. I'm going to try and break down the structures of the brain. So we have the lower brain, so you can just imagine the lower part of the brain. It's less evolved, sometimes called the lizard brain or reptilian brain. In this part of the brain, there's a tiny almond-shaped structure called the amygdala. This is where our fears come from. So this part of the brain is like a fire alarm, which is a good thing. You need that. It's constantly on high alert, ready to sound the alarm when things happen. It's the most powerful part of the brain, and it has direct influence on the most powerful functions of your body. The top part of the brain, or the front part here, contains the cerebral cortex and the insula cortex. So don't worry about the names of these things. The insula cortex helps with relational functioning, empathy, and connecting to others. It also helps with focus and tuning into bodily sensations. The prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that's highly developed in humans and primates. It allows for executive control, or at least guidance, over the more primitive parts of the brain. It exerts inhibitory control over stress response and emotional reactivity. Because the brain is not as rigid as we once thought, but rather plastic and pliable, we've learned that the brain has the ability to change. So neuroplasticity helps to thicken and rewire the cerebral cortex. So basically you want the brain to function from the top down. You want that executive control over your emotions and reactions. When it functions from the bottom up, you have limited control over your emotions and fears, which is represented in how you breathe. A perfect example of this is our lung transplant population. So these patients, they get new lungs. They literally get new lungs. And when they come out of surgery, and I've been there, I've extubated many of them, they go back into their old breathing patterns. And there's no judgment there, because that's the way their brain is wired to breathe. That's the only way they know how to breathe. And it takes time, but they're able to rewire their brains and learn how to breathe the same way that their new lungs want to breathe. So I just find that really fascinating, because I feel like it really proves a lot of what I'm saying. So I know you're probably thinking, how do I get a thicker prefrontal cortex? No? Through meditation and mindfulness. So it's not as hard as it sounds. In fact, some of you probably do these things already. It can be taking a quiet walk, it could be doing the dishes or washing your car, or just noticing your breath. Mindfulness is merely focusing on one thing, something we all suck at. It used to be that multitasking was this desired skill, but what we know is that it stresses the brain, producing lower quality results. By moving and focusing in new ways, we strengthen our neuroplasticity. This happens every time we practice yoga, whether it be through the physical practice or through being mindful and paying attention to the breath. So what does yoga look like for each of us? You don't have to go to a yoga class to practice yoga. You do it when you practice your breath work or breath retraining, such as pursed lip breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, or the three-part breath. This is all yoga. You do it already. By purposefully manipulating the breath, you can reduce that sense of breathing discomfort You might even feel more motivated to participate in social and recreational activities, or maybe even try a chair yoga class. So I recently made a pretty large career change. I left Colorado and I moved to Vermont to get their pulmonary rehab program started. I know, it's really sad. I'm like almost gonna cry right now. But I get to incorporate all this stuff into the pulmonary rehab program at the University of Vermont. And I get to work with the pulmonologist, Dr. David Kaminsky, who I just told you the study about. Yeah, and Bernie Sanders. But, so bear with me, I'm new to this. I'm brand new to pulmonary rehab, and I just graduated my first 2 groups. And I'm getting the feedback from the first groups, and I'm going through the testing results and the surveys and evaluations. And the one thing that starts to stand out is how much the breath retraining has changed their lives. Which isn't a surprise to me, but it's just awesome to see that, because they practice these breathing techniques and they're able to get out and do more stuff. As I compare this to my role as a yoga teacher, I see this in my yoga students as well. It takes them a while before they start to understand that the breath is the main part of yoga. But once they make that connection, it's like this switch goes off in their bodies, and things just start to make more sense. Every person here today has the capability to change how they breathe. You have the strength right inside of you, just waiting to be discovered. Shall we practice yoga now? So I'm just going to do a few of the poses that are in your handout, because I don't think we got there. No handout? Sorry. Okay. We'll maybe email it out. I don't know where Joy is. We'll figure it out. Okay. All right, so again, finding a comfortable seat, uncrossing your legs, placing both feet on the ground. And just noticing how you feel right now. Just noticing the breath, maybe any qualities as it moves in and out of your nose, down the back of your throat. And then slowly, I'm going to guide with the breath, but don't feel like you have to match my breathing. So we're just going to inhale and slowly lift up your head softly, no straining the neck. And then exhale, the head comes back down, chin towards your chest. We'll do that 2 more times. So the inhale breath brings you up, and you can close your eyes if you like. And then exhale, bring it back down. And again, inhale slowly up. And then exhale back down. Good job. And then one more time. Inhale. And then exhale. And then bringing your head back up to neutral. We're just going to turn the head side to side. So inhale and center. And then exhale, gazing to the right or the left, doesn't matter. And then inhale back to center. And then exhale to the other side. Inhale back to center. We'll do 1 more on each side. Turning to the side. And then back to center. And then to the other side. And then back to center. Now we're going to do what I call the sleeping stretch. So we're going to relax the muscles around the neck. So take your hands together, and you place them on the side of your head, and you just gently rest your cheek on your hands as if you're going to take a nap, but don't fall asleep. And then just focusing on your breath and trying to use the breath to relax all these muscles that get really tense on the side of the neck. Nice, slow, deep and even breaths. If you want to use pursed lip breathing, I highly encourage it. Let's do one more breath here. And then using the strength of your hands, just gently push your head back up to center, and then we'll switch sides. And then slowly just allowing the weight of your head to come into your hands. And then using the breath to bring relaxation into the side of the neck. One more breath here. And then again, using your hands to just gently push your head back up to center. Releasing your arms down by your sides. And then we're going to do what I call shoulder shrugs. So we're going to coordinate the breath with these. So as you inhale, you shrug the shoulders up, and then you exhale and you let it go. We'll do two more. So inhale, shrug them up towards your ears. Exhale, let it go. And last one, really squeezing any tension, and then exhale, let it go. Good job. And then we'll just place our hands on our lap, and then bringing your awareness back to the breath. And again, if it's comfortable, you can close your eyes, or you can just gaze down softly in front of you. And just noticing the qualities of the breath. Nice and slow, but strong. The breath supports your entire body. The strength is right there within you all the time, whenever you need it. Let's take one more breath together. Inhale, filling up. And then exhale, pursed lip, blow it out. Bringing your awareness back, opening your eyes. It's my greatest honor to be able to share my love and passion for yoga and breathing with you. I bow to the strength of the breath within all of you. Thank you.
That last segment looked to me about as relaxed an audience who really wasn't asleep that I've ever seen. Are there any, we have a couple of minutes for questions, if there are any specific questions regarding yoga or your breathing or both?
I don't have a question, but I want to say that the 4 years that I've been on oxygen, I was told I would never get off the oxygen, and I'd be on it full time and it would get worse. And now, I'm not running marathons, but I am off of oxygen as long as I'm not sleeping, and as long as I'm here in the city. I can do a lot more with the pulmonary rehab that I went through, with the breathing and the yoga. And thank you guys so much. Thanks. My life.
All right. Other questions?
I also don't have a question.
Oh, okay.
I suffer from AFib, arterial fibrillation.
Sure.
And I find that the deep breathing keeps my pulse usually under 85. And it helps a lot. I didn't know why until I heard her talk about the baby.
Oh, there you go. Another one. Looks like we have one coming up the middle. Yes, right up the middle. Go ahead.
For the type of breathing you were talking about, I don't know how to pronounce it, it starts with PRA.
The pranayama. Yeah.
There is a free app that you can actually get on your smartphones that will help you do it also. And I've been using it for about a year.
All right.
It's called whatever that.
Anybody else? Anybody have any questions?
I just wanted to make a comment about that. Just be cautious, right? So when you look at, and I'm sure you do this already, just make sure the breathing style that you're practicing is a gentle, it's nothing, because there's a lot of pretty aggressive types of pranayama out there. So just use your best judgment. ask your respiratory therapist, ask your pulmonologist, or find a yoga
Thumbs
teacher.
up, please. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I try and do those breathing exercises, but it never feels like I'm really doing them right. Is that just, it still always comes right back up to my chest? Have any tips?
Are you doing any physical, like chest opening type stuff before you're doing the breathing exercises?
Probably not.
Okay. So what the ancient science, the way that they practice it is they do the physical, and so once we get this little handout figured out, there's a lot of stuff in here to work on opening the chest, so that helps. I'm not saying it's gonna make you feel like, oh, that's it, but if we can start, because I know myself, I get really tight in the side of my chest because you don't do a lot here. So these poses help to open up your rib cage so that you can breathe better. So then the next step is the breath work. So when you get to the breath work, your body's ready for it. Does that make sense? Okay.
Okay, we have a question here.
Will you run through just verbally the poses that we went through? Because some of us don't have the handout, so we can just write it down.
Yeah, I'm trying to, so I start with the neck a lot of times in chair yoga just to kind of relax that. So we did looking up, we did looking down, and then we did the side to side. Then we did the sleeping stretch, so opening up the side of the neck. And then we did the shoulder shrugs just to kind of release tension around the shoulders. Does that help? Okay. Yeah.
Did you concentrate on anything other than opening the chest, such as the belly breathing, like we did when we were babies? And also letting the air out with a slight pursed lips. Don't try to really blow it out, in my opinion, and we need to blow it out a lot longer than you do.
Sure, thank you. Yes, those are good reminders, yeah.
But the belly breathing, I want to know.
So you're asking like as far as any exercises for the belly? Is that what you're asking? Sorry.
In other words, instead of breathing, just open your chest. Breathe with your belly. Lie on the floor, hold your chest still, and push your belly out.
Yeah, so everybody's different. Some people like to lay on their back and they get in tune with that belly breathing because it'll take some of the other stuff that gets in the way out of the way. So for some people that works really well. For some people it's sitting up, but it takes a lot of practice. Yes, it does. I think diaphragmatic breathing is the hardest thing we teach in pulmonary rehab. Good.
I'd just like to say, I'm not a patient, but the VA recommended that I do yoga, and I'm the last guy you would ever imagine would do it, but I started doing it, and now I highly recommend it, and you can find yoga classes for all levels at any YMCA, rec centers. I could easily do yoga 5 days a week for free through my YMCAs, and it's helped me a ton. So, and believe me, you don't have to be able to put your foot behind your head. Just sit, you can sit in a chair, and it's extremely beneficial. So I just thought I would put that plug in.
Thank you.
You don't have to breathe or take any breaths in if you have transtracheal oxygen. It just goes in there whether you breathe in or not. It's wonderful.
One last question. Where's your heart? Vermont or Colorado?
Colorado.
Enough? Enough, thank you. Thank you very much, Judy.